Hello, everybody.
Hello.
My name is Alan Cliff. My native name is Tatonka Hugh Hamani, carries for Buffalo. I was born 1955, Fort Belknap, Montana. And our traditional way is to tell who my grandparents are. Oliver Brisboy, Mary Catherine Cayuse. My great-grandparents buried in Frenchtown Monument, just right out of town here. And she's buried in Helix, Oregon. I descended from the Cayuse, from the Assiniboine, from the Arapaho. During this time, I became a sun dancer. I'm a journeyman pipe fitter living in Benton City, Washington. I'm married, beautiful daughter, wonderful son, lives here in Walla Walla. Through my years, I came to the area in 1974 at Hanford as a journeyman, as a steam fitter. Throughout my years, I worked there and managed a full career, and finally retired from the pipe fitters after many years. During those many years, I became a sun dancer, a Native American sun dancer. I started way back in 1974, learning about the old ways. When I started, it was illegal to know anything about Native religion. It was illegal to speak my language. It was illegal to drum, to sing. I could be locked up for 35 years for running a ceremony, a sweat lodge or a sun dance. It was really difficult times back then, but by the same token, we were also withheld from our information. Who are we? Where do I come from? I grew up with brown skin, not knowing really who I am. As I worked through my trade, many of the non-Native individuals, they were well aware of Native history, way more than me, because they've grown up around reservations and amongst the people. So I was fortunate I had a good influence when I was young. Working at FFTF, and I was working with some old Indians there, and they encouraged me to follow my heritage. 1976, bicentennial. The times were changing, they were moving quick. My parents, my mom, she worked in the Indian Child Welfare System. She got her master's degree. During her years there at Portland State University, we come out of Grand Coulee, Washington. And during that time, my mother met in a group of Native Americans. And they were just a small group called Ampo, Morning Daybreak in Lakota. And they were learning the Lakota heritage, they were learning the Native heritage. That man came from South Dakota. First he was out here as a welder in a shipyard, had bad breathing, but later he went on a vision quest at Bear Butte, South Dakota. And he was shown there that he was going to come to the West Coast. But he was coming out, he's seeing a wave of death coming from the East Coast. And it was killing all the people. It was wiping out all the Native Americans, everything that we had. The complete spirit of the people was going to die. But instead, in his vision, he's seen it welling up. Instead of wiping us out, it got stronger and got stronger. And then we as Native people, we were lost to one another. But then an old way came back, helped us to find ourselves. We believe was a sacred pipe, the Chinoopa. I'm telling you this history because it has a lot to do with the way things are today and how we're looking at things now. We're learning from a knowledge that was given to us by non-Native people. We're being told that we've come across a land bridge or that was created and we have Asian descendancy and that everything comes from one place. Through my many years coming through the Native religions, the sun dances, I started learning from my elders. I started learning a different narrative. They told me a narrative in the Arapaho Nation when I started sun dancing there in 1981. Grandson, they lined us all up, took us outside the altar. We fasted 3 days. No food, no water. Sun danced every day, praying for our family, for our loved ones, that they be well, for miracles, for our family could be healed. On the second day, they take us all out and they tell us the creation story, the Native creation story. They line us all up and, oh, we're starving pretty heavy, we're cold early in the morning, we're shy, we just got trunks on, we're wearing our star quilts, and they line us all up in the morning sun. And they tell us how Creator brought us from the Pleiades, from the seven sisters, way out there in the stars. How one time we're living out there and somehow we kind of didn't get along. We weren't quite agreeing with everything. We kept making mistakes. So the Creator took us from there and he put us on a red planet. We call it Mars. They tell us that we lived on that planet many years and that things were going great, but again, we messed up. Whatever it was, we turned that planet 90 degrees and we dried up all the water. Some spirits stayed back. Some of the people stayed back. But then Creator, he decided to give us another chance. In that chance, he sent us to this rock, to this blue planet. And when he did, he came with a creation story. And each time, he brought us from them stars. We're his children. He wanted us to make it, to survive, to keep making it in a good way. So he got here and he created this rock, and then there was a gas, he created water. And then he created some water animals, a beaver, a grebe, a mud duck, and another animal, turtle. They were swimming around, he needed land. He told them, go down the bottom and get me some land. The first turtle couldn't do it, the beaver couldn't do it. He said, boy, I really need that land. Little mud duck says, well, I can do it, Creator, let me go. Oh, no, you're too small. He went anyway, so went ahead and went. It's gone a long time. Creator said, well, he's done now. Then he come up and there he had mud. And so the Creator took that mud and he used this song we call the creation song. And everywhere he sang the song, he threw that mud and the land come up out of the water. And when he started singing, he started creating first the fish, then he created the air animals, the white eagle and all these air animals. Then he created the four-legged, and he created all the beautiful plants and everything in it. That's a song he sang. Yo hey, wa yo hey, yo hey, wa yo hey, hey ra ya, hey ra ya, wa ha, hey ra ya, hey ra ya, hey ra ya, wa ha, wa ya, ya, hey ha, hey ra ya, okay, yo hey, yo hey, yo hey, wa yo hey, hey ra ya, hey ra ya, wa ha, hey ra ya, hey ra ya, hey ra ya, wa ha, wa ya, 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 sang that song all the way through till the creation was made. Then it was time to go. He needed to go to the other places in the space and clear in the universe. He had a lot to do. So he left back a creature, one of the animals. He took our spirits from that red planet. And after he made us human beings, us animals, he brought our spirit together. And that's where the story begins. Coming out of the dark, coming out of the creation. And the question remains, were us Native Americans here at the flood? Were we here before? What happened to us after? That's what I'm here to tell you today, the things that I learned today. I would like to share with you. So I thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for inviting me, Roger, and class. Thank you for sharing this time. I hope that I can leave you with some questions. I have many questions myself. I'm just a student myself. I've asked permission from the appropriate people, Nick Zenter, who I'm going to talk about a little bit. Randy Lewis gave a creation story. I've talked with some of the natives from down the valley. So it's our way to, before we speak, to ask those people permission that I share that with you. And in hopes the tools that I hand you today, you can go out and look yourself. That's what I'm hoping, that maybe you too might be able to add something to the story, be a part of the story. So it goes clear back, 1991. Don't know why, but We've been following Martin Heiber all those years, from 1976, 1979, we went back to Greengrass, South Dakota, to the first legal Sundance in the United States. All the elders were there. My brother and I carried an eagle and a buffalo, and we took it back to South Dakota to get blessed at the first legal Sundance. It had never been legal before that. My mother created the Indian Child Welfare System in Portland State University. Out of that, next was the American Indian Religious Freedom Act, 1979, followed by the Native American Graves Repatriation Act. That's where we're at today. It was brand new. We were just now learning. So when we had an opportunity, an individual named Martin Heiber and Brave Buffalo, DeVere Eastman, they had a vision to have a Sundance. So in 1979, we went back to Greengrass, South Dakota to that first legal Sundance. We had our bundles blessed there, and we came out and followed Martin Heiber to Mount Hood in 1980. They had that first Sundance there, first legal one off the reservation. First one in the United States. My mother helped get that organization. She wrote their charter. We had an individual that for 4 years fought the US government to allow a native ceremony to happen right on our native land. And we got the rights to do that, the US Forest Service. When all of this happened, we didn't know that all these other things were gonna be happening to us. The elders told us the knowledge is gonna come to us, to keep praying, to keep moving forward. The knowledge is gonna come. Move forward. There's so much more to know. My grandmother told me to forget it. You gotta make it in this white world. I'm not gonna teach you anything Indian. Then when she seen that I was gonna make it, become a pipe fitter and take care of myself, then she had me go and learn the Indian stuff. This is what I learned. When we came through in 1979 with the first legal Sundance, I had an eagle blessed. My brother had a buffalo blessed over there. We became bundle keepers. When we came back with Martin Heiber, my brother helped put up the first Sundance in Mount Hood, south of Womack in the Dalles, up in the US Forest Service. At that time, I became the head of security. We had a lot of problems. The non-natives didn't like it. Ku Klux Klan, the Posse Comitatus, they made some runs at us. They told us to get out. We stole this land. We're not gonna give it back to you. Get out of here. But it was our native rights, it was our native heritage. So we stayed there. And they sent the US Justice Department in. I didn't want guns in camp. They wanted us to man it, but I didn't want to do that, neither did the elders. So they deputized me as a US Justice Department employee. Though I don't get paid, I've been mandated to maintain the cultural integrity of Native American religion, sacred sites, and any Native cultural ways that need to be taken care of and protected. It's my heritage and it's my responsibility. I swore on a Bible that I would do that, and it's with me till they put me into that earth. I will always take care of these old Native ways, but I will also share the knowledge. So when we started going, a man found Martin Heiber. It was 1992, and he comes from Hopi country. I understand you folks have been learning a little bit about the Hopi Nation and some of its involvement. I put this up there today because it's a spiral. It's in Horn Rapids, out north of Benton City. What's it doing in Horn Rapids, you say? And if you look, there's just a little bitty one etched right in here, in this area. And it points to this one. Surprisingly enough, it's the same 9 circles, and this other one has 6. It's so old, the ground is literally growing over the top of it. Those sages you see here, those are 4 and 5 foot tall. They're this tall. They're massive sages. It wasn't, I thought, well, maybe put there by the Japanese, were kept there in a prisoner of war camp. Couldn't be them. Maybe a cultural crew come out there and just decided to dig something in the sand. Nope, that ain't it either. Somebody drove over it, one of the Forest Service guys. You see all these tracks that are going through it. He went right through the middle. And it kind of disturbed me. I thought, well, gee, they're gonna dig it up and get artifacts out of there, because the first thing that hunters do is get the artifacts. But you know, he went over them and did not even make a dent. Literally, that four-wheel drive went over the top of it, and it is still intact today. It's still out there. You're more than welcome to go see it. Why is it important? It's important because out at Wallula Gap, not far from us, way out towards the Columbia River, right east of Pasco, on the Columbia River, there's a swastika there, a green swastika. That's a Hopi symbol. It wasn't made by the Germans. It isn't a Nazi symbol. It's a Hopi symbol of gathering, of the people coming together, of creation points. I'm going to show you, I got a picture of that here. I brought that with me. And it's important because during the time that I've learned, I started looking for this Hopi symbol. And it led me all over the place. Like I say, the first time the Hopi contacted us was back in '92. They came up here, and our medicine man taught us to drum and sing on the ridges. This is what started it all. It was at Wallula Gap, out at Finley. We were on just opposite that paper mill. There's a big ridge over there, and we found some artifacts on the bottom. We didn't know anything about it. When I went there, people were pot hunting, but they dug up bones of an old one. And their people started getting sick, severely sick. Their jobs were going bad. Their Harleys were wrecking them. Everything was going to terrible. And the guy calls me, "What do I do?" And I said, "Well, what do you got?" He said, "I got a jawbone in my hands." Man, it just sent ripples through me. I said, "You got to put it back. You got to take care of it. It'll take your children, your family, wipe you out." Okay, he put it back, and I went to the medicine man. "What do I do?" And he said, "You got to sing. You got to set flags there." So I did. I set prayer flags, and I started, and he said, "Now you're going to have to Sundance to save that family so nobody's hurt." What's the Sundance? I go into a native Arapaho Sundance Lodge. I go in there 3 days with no food or water. I dance every day. I sacrifice my body, my food, my life, so that these people can live, that this thing will come out in a good way. These are the results of that Sundance. They answered my question. They let this information out. So when it started happening, I brought the elders into it. Amelia's so happy, and her son. They came once to identify what the sites were at Finley. And from there, they sent me on top. Once they seen that where the guy had dug up was below a white Mazama ash. I didn't know nothing about the Mazama ash at the time. This was 1991. And they found him below. He was crushed green. The whole body was green. It wasn't bone white because it had been underwater for many years. Water had been over the top of that thing. And as the elders told me, there were thousands of them from there clear down into the river. I kept drumming and singing. Then they told me, "You go on top. We want the stuff on top." So I went up on top. I discovered 36 sites in Finley. Up on top, Vision Quest sites. I discovered one that looks like the Eye of Cyrus. Exactly just like an Egyptian eye against the side of the hill up there. Finally, I took the elders up there, pointing out what I had discovered, and Amelia points across to the gap, Wallula Gap, above Two Sisters. She said, "Your relations are there. There's writing, there's sacred writing there. We want to know about the things on top. They're tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of years old." Wow, it was a shock to me, 1991. So I started looking. It took me a long time to get over there, but finally I started discovering it. And they were right. I discovered writing everywhere across those hills. 100 feet across this writing is. Time and season. At a certain time of the year, you're going to see the green grass grow up, and it'll be taller. The symbols will be taller than the grass around it. And then the tops of the heads turn yellow first. That's when the writing appears. You can't see it any other time. Between 10:30 in the morning till about 11:30, and then 2:30 to 4:30 at night. Because they're all on a northerly face, and the sun's going around back here. So it doesn't light them up till it's here, and the sun is over here. Those are the only times that you can see it. What are they? They're stories of the land. They tell what happened at that place where waterfalls are. A circle means a spring. A U shape down represents man. A U shape up represents woman. At Wallula Gap, there's a sign of the woman. It's a U shape with a line down. That's a sign of the woman. Way up in the mountains, way up in the Wanaha, where old Chief Joseph is buried, not at Wanaha, not at the lake. He's up there in the mountains. There's a U shape like this and one down. That's a sign of the man. That sign is so ancient. It's ancient. But when you move the two together, they complete the circle with a line all the way down, representing birth and life. That's an ancient city. And they're made of grass. They're in these hills right around us. I'm sure they were put there about the time this year was started. So, got a little bit of time here, so I'm gonna go ahead and, when I started with the Kennewick man and I was giving a presentation, we were presenting this to the Umatilla Indians. My grandfather's name is Carl Sampson, chief of the Walla Walla tribe. He's my grandmother's first cousin. Our grandmother was Mary Catherine Cayuse and Oliver Brisbois. Oliver Brisbois came from Frenchtown. He came out of with McLaughlin when they came over the Columbia River. And they brought a boat over the Columbia River, they put it together, and they were racing down the Columbia, but they got froze in the water, so they spent the winter chasing off other tribes and wolves and who knows what, but they made it. They finally got over here. He disappeared for Hudson's Bay, and he married my grandmother, Mary Catherine Cayuse. They had 3 children, and that's my descendancy. My name's Alan Cliff, carries the buffalo. Grandparents are Oliver Brisbois, Mary Catherine Cayuse. My brother and I helped identify the ancient one, 1998. We've got sites that are tens of thousands of years old on top. We've discovered geoglyphs, burials, stone cairns, artifacts at Lalit, Rattlesnake Mountain. The westward expansion of the ridge followed what's now Lower Valley, Yakima Valley, and westward to the mountains. There's a ridge that comes from the Rockies, goes all the way across Columbia River, and comes out at the Blue Mountains. We followed that ridge. So, brought some field notes. Now this is the first time I've ever done this, a presentation like this, so I hope you'll excuse me. Try to give you as much information as I can. There's a YouTube video. Can I go to the pictures?
Yeah. Just push that button, I guess.
Here?
Take 1 second.
Huh? Okay. And this rolls it up?
No, you gotta do that on your phone.
Tap on them and they'll get bigger.
I've discovered sacred walls, and that's what this story is about. I don't really want to. This is a wall in Wallula Gap. It's 40 feet long, it's 30 feet high on one wall, 15 feet on the other side.
Tap on it, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
If you notice the stones, They're very old. They have the same, what's called Pantene. The Pantene is a coloration of that rock. After it's taken hundreds and hundreds of years to turn that color of rock to dark. The original color is a tan. And then the lichen that you see over the top of it, the lichen takes, from our studies, it takes 10 years to grow 1/16 of an inch. That's how long it takes for that to spread. Now, all the lichen on that can be one body. In other words, it's one unit by itself, and then not too far away, you'll see some more lichen. That's another body by itself. They could each be identified just like a human being. And they'll grow over those rocks as long as they're not spread apart. They'll just keep growing and growing until they cover the whole thing. That we estimate is taken 7,000 years to grow a complete patch of lichen, 5 to 7 feet wide. That's what we're finding on the average over these rock cairns. 5 to 7,000 years.
And that's on the higher reaches of
Right.
Wazula Gap?
Yep, this is right at the bottom of the canyon. Just on the north face, you'll see, as you're coming around Wallula from Two Sisters, there's a sign there that talks about the area. And you can hike right up that ridge, and this is up there.
Mm.
You'll notice those two stones right together, they're about 10 feet apart.
Hmm.
This one stone on the right there, they literally hauled that out in the middle of that wall. It's sitting 15 feet high. How'd they do that? Why did they do it? If you point the two together and you look back the other direction, it points down. When the sun comes around, it points down at the canyon wall down below. There's caches down there. There's burials all over down below. So they put them together to mark. They're a marker. This one here, this is wall. From here it goes all the way up, but it's buried. You can't quite see it right here. There's a dark soil that goes right underneath this right here, and it goes back up. My belief is that's that wall, and the others like it were buried. It looks to me, whoops. I need to leave the phone alone. It looks to me, there's the top of the wall, and the bottom of the wall appears to be buried 2 to 3 feet into this layer. I believe those were two separate floods that came through the Dalles area. This is at Horse Thief Park. There's literally 100 walls from Biggs Junction all the way through the Dalles. They're way in the middle of nowhere. Some of these walls are at 900 feet up in the air. What are they doing at 900 feet? You see the top. That's about maybe 100 feet long, probably about 40 yards, 50 yards long. It comes out from the bottom of the canyon, from that creek. It goes up, and Horse Thief Park is out over here, off to the left. I believe they were used as fisheries that came down the sides of the wall. I had one of my brothers tested that theory. He built a rock wall fishery down below John Day Dam. He used fencing material. He built them about 3.5, 4 feet tall. He put about 6 of them all the way up, coming out of the, when the water was down low. And when he come up, and he started that night, when the water come back up, it loaded up with catfish, more catfish than he could handle, because it created a perfect eddy. And then all of a sudden, a whole bunch of trash fish come in, or suckers and all kinds of things, they found that hole. So he kind of waited and waited, then finally he started getting salmon. Then a big old sturgeon came up into it and just tore up his nets, just ripped them all up. But he captured the sturgeon. But it proved to me that these rock walls work. This concept is not being done anywhere in today's Native American community. Most of them aren't even aware of it. Why is it important? I feel it's important because it helps establish who we are as Native Americans, that we were here at the time of Lewis Lake 150,000 years ago. Way past 17,000. We don't need DNA. We ain't got to dig up bones. We got them in the rock walls right around us. These things are all over Biggs Junction. I hope to do a presentation and start working more on it. I want to get out there and start filming. Yes?
I'm just clarifying, I guess. So you're saying that these rock walls were for fisheries during Lake Lewis? Is that why they're up so high?
I believe that they were there during the actual Columbia River itself.
Oh, okay.
They were at that elevation.
Hmm.
And when I go to the Google Earth, I'll show you what I believe is where the original I found the Columbia River in 2 floods. The Missoula flood, I believe, maybe more. There could have been 100 floods, but the major ones that carved the cataclysm, carved Grand Coulee, Moses Coulee, Wallula Gap, the Columbia Gorge itself, Felipe Canyon, all those things was a huge, huge major waterfall. Well, now as I'm studying with Nick Zenter, I'm beginning to understand there was not just one. It's like my ancestors said, there were hundreds of waterfalls. That's why we lived on the ridges. We had to live up there. There was no other choice. And I'd hope that you guys might be able to find this book. If you get an opportunity, I'd like you to look it up. It's called Stone Age on the Columbia. It's by Emery Strong. I'm going to reference some of this material today. Why I'd like you to look it up and read it. It's extensive, but it's got sacred sites all through the Portland area, from Astoria, all the way up through Camas, and all the way up through the Dalles, clear up to Wenatchee. It's got the sacred sites and digs that were doing, I believe, 1936. It was when the dams were being built. And this guy, they went through there and did extensive digs. There's a lot of material here, so I'll just put that up for now. Go through this list.
Well, Alan, I was gonna say, in Hell's Canyon, the elder Alan Pinkham took our land and water justice class, that is also from Whitman. And he showed a certain type of segmented walling, it was a little bit different configuration, but he was saying that different tiers were fishing at different elevations at the Snake River and that steep canyon.
Yeah.
And they had to adjust to it. They had to adjust the fishing and it contained all of the fish species you just mentioned.
Well, that matches exactly what's going on here.
And he pointed that out, and you could see that there's this, they're building these platforms, these walls.
That's perfect. Because the one wall here that I've got, is at a place called Fence Creek. Hopefully I got it in here. Nope, don't look like I sent it. I'll tell you about it. Fence Creek is a wall 7 to 8 feet tall. It's about, I'm guessing, maybe 100 yards long. You go to Wallowa Lake, then you go to a town called Imnahaw. You follow Imnahaw all the way down the canyon, and right when the bridge jumps over, right where the blacktop ends, it's gonna climb the hill. Right there, you're gonna pass a fence. That fence goes all the way down to the river. Interesting, it's at a zigzag. Why? Because it won't fall. It's designed, and I don't know how, I'm guessing the first geologist that discovered it, was on a gentleman named, I believe Alex Smith was his name. He was the first farmer there. He was good friends with Chief Joseph and the Nez Perce people. So they all got along. But when he came into the land, that fence was already there. And the gentleman who was supervisor for the first U.S. Forest Service there, he took a geologist out there just to get an idea, how old is that wall? They dug 3 feet down and never hit the bottom of that wall at Fence Creek. My elders told me that Amelia's so happy that when we were working at Wallula in '91, they said, when you find it on top, it takes 300 to 600 years to grow 1/16 of an inch of soil. Soil doesn't come in by sand blowing in. It does. Sometimes there's a loss they call it, but on top of the ridges, no. The plant has to live and die. Those roots gotta die before they turn into soil. So one of the places today that I discovered, Felipe Canyon, 10 inches. I took a stick alongside of it and put it down in the ground, and it's 10 inches down in the ground before it hit the bottom. It could be higher. And like that one photo I was showing you, it could be 4 feet underneath the ground. See, there's a wall on the right side, and it's starting to build up. You can see the sediment building up here and here. And it's starting to raise up over this wall. And its match on the other side is already built up. You can see how the soil has built up and it's left this left that imprint. Well, I think that wall survived 2 major floods. Why? Because it's not that violent at the other end of that camp. Well, we're getting towards the end of the class here, so I'm going to go ahead and give you some of the information I have. I'd like you to reference YouTube, Nick Zenter. Ancient Rivers of the Pacific Northwest. There's a lot of geology there, but this one in particular involves the Native Americans. He talks about dark cobbles coming down from the Yakima, yellow cobbles coming from the Columbia River, red cobbles coming from the Snake River. So whenever you're in a valley, you pick up a rock, if it's one of those 3 colors, it comes from one of those 3 areas. We found yellow cobble in Benton City. What's yellow cobble doing there? Columbia River went through Benton City at one time. And that's one of the things I'm going to share with you now. At one time, after studying Nick Zenter and his crew, literally, this story is put together by students. All the students for many, many years, maybe 35 years, the students have been out there doing the geology, going through the classes, doing the work, looking at the books, reading the papers. They're the ones that put this together. And they discovered that the Columbia River changed courses. At one time, it's possible that before the lava came in here and covered everything, the Columbia River went right straight to Wallula Gap. Then at 20 million years later, it filled that whole valley. It started coming up in fissures all over. They say 20 million years ago. That's where one of our creation stories starts. That's where Randy Lewis's story starts. It's where the Hopi starts, coming out of the ground. Through reading Drummer Dreamers, reference Drummer Dreamers. It tells a creation story in there. One that's just like the Arapaho talk, but differently. In the Drummer Dreamer book, the Alipio, the days before non-furred animals. We were standing on the Blue Mountains and we watched Plateau and Mount Adams come out of the water. Literally 235 million years ago, when the Cascades, before they were formed, that the natives tell us the mountains, volcanoes came out first. They even got names for them. Plateau, they believe, is where the unborn come through. Years came by, and the mountains started raising, but they still weren't up high enough yet. And we didn't behave ourselves, just like at the Red Planet and over there at the Pleiades. The Creator took us out. He brought fire from the sky, rubbed everything out. Whether it was a satellite, whether it was a comet, whatever it was, it burned everything, but he gave us another chance. Life was moving along again. Things started growing. But still, it was non-furred animals. Johnson Meninik tells the first war story. It says two brothers were out hunting, looking for food, and they heard twice. They looked back, they couldn't see nothing, and the third time they heard it, followed by a huge roar. And they said they looked back and they looked up, and they said one of the Creator's great beasts the size of a tree with a mouth the size of a cave started chasing them. So they went running up a rock fall. They went way up far as they could go, but the animal was so big it couldn't climb. So they took rocks and they started throwing it into that mouth until finally the animal collapsed and fell over. They went down and they finished the job and cut its throat. Then they cut off some of its hide, and they say it had like sticks growing out, spread apart, and real rough skin. They cut off the skin, they created robes. Two brothers went back and they made the first war dance, not against killing another human being, but against killing one of God's great beasts. First war story, non-furred animals. Life was going good, but the legends tell us in that book, Drummer Dreamers, we didn't listen again. Things, not just us, but our leaders weren't listening. Some big bad witch was making life awful rough. And that time, they tell us Mother Earth was covered. It didn't come out of the volcanoes. The lava came out and covered the land. They tell us 1,000 feet in Benton City, 3,000 feet in Kennewick, 5,000 feet at the bend of the Snake River. They tell us that we were covered under there in caves, and it took generations for us to come up. We could see the holes, but the bat, the badger, and the mole, those spirits are the ones that helped us. Generations come out of that ground. They say the first ones came out of the ground, they perished. They don't know where that crew was. They never came back. So the chief, he took his family and the tribe and those that wanted to go, they went out that hole. The others stayed behind. They say that they're still back down there today. You hear legends about people that live under the ground. That's them. That's us that stayed behind. They didn't come out and emerge like the Hopi and the rest of us. When we came out, the ground was bare. There was nothing here. And they tell us a legend that when we come up out of Canada somewhere, out of the northwest here, we come up and the ground was rock. There was no life, no nothing. So our leader went up on the top of a tall, bald mountain. I believe it was Rattlesnake. He prayed and prayed, and a cougar chief came to him. Many teeth, upside down pyramid eyes. And he said, okay, we're going to give you another chance. You're going to have life again, but there's not going to be like before with an abundance of fruit and food everywhere. Instead, you're going to have 4 seasons. There's going to be hot and cold and in between. There'll be furred animals, but you're going to have to learn how to hunt them in season and balance it out. There'll be feathered animals, and then roots and tubers. Nothing in abundance like was before, but you're going to have to be able to keep in balance and always remember to thank the Creator. Always put the Creator first, thanking them as His children. Life was going along great. We were going along great, then all of a sudden we didn't do it again. We didn't behave again. And the third time He sent water. I believe it was the Missoula flood. That water came and rubbed out all of life. It's where Randy Lewis's story starts. The Wenatchee Indians. We were here way before the Ice Age. We were here during the Ice Age, and we were here when the Missoula flood came. Randy Lewis's story, the Wenatchee Indians. He said they emerged out of the dark. Specksman helped them come out. It was a water monster. He lived in Moses Coulee in the lake, in the water. And he helped the people come back. He helped two twins. Coyote came and took the twins and he put them in the back of a canyon. He taught them all the medicines. He took all the animals over there. And he taught these two twins, Blue Star and Red Star, things they were gonna need. He says, you're gonna have to help the humans, they're coming. They're gonna be a lot of trouble, but you're gonna have to help them out. But they had to get rid of the water monster first, because the water monster, Specksman, was eating anything that came to that water. So finally, after they taught Red Star and Blue Star everything, they finally brought him out to the edge of light. And they said, okay, your job is to go take out the water monster. So they went and tricked the water monster. One twin over here, the water monster would go over there, the other twin would show. Back and forth till finally they played him out and killed him. They put his heart down below Wenatchee at Rock Island. They put his head there. And then they took a tail and they sent it south. They say they took one leg and they created the Willamette people in the Warm Springs. They took another leg and created the Cayuse and all the people down there. Another leg went up to be the Salish and all the people of the north. Another leg went to be the Wenatchee people. Another one went to be the Okanagan. And that's their explanation of how life started there. Life was going along good. Coyote made a deal with them though. They lived in a time of giants, mammoths. There was sloths. There was saber-toothed tigers. There was camels. There was great big fish. A fish, they called them tiger fish. They had big fangs. They had to kill them with spears. There was land, but the coyote told them, don't live below. And don't live on the bone or near the bone, meaning that great big ice. The ice, they say, a mile, maybe 2 miles high. So they agreed never to live down in the flats with the giants and where all the trouble, and they said it's like a mixer down there. You don't want to be living in the big mixer where trouble is. Life was going along great. They'd go down, they'd kill their game, and they'd bring it back to the tops of the ridges. Just like the elders said. They stayed up to the tops of the ridges. Then one day, they said everybody was home alone. It was quiet. It was at nighttime, and they heard a rumble and thunder, and a big kaboom. And all of a sudden, they heard animals screaming and everything turning. And they were afraid to go outside. They stayed in their homes. And then finally, things started calming. They went out the next day, and it was still fog and wind and rain, and they had to wait. Finally, after things started calming out, they looked. They come off the mountain and they looked and they said the valley was ripped away. All life had disappeared. All the giants were gone. But so was all the food. They had to rely on the deer and the elk and the buffalo that stayed with them in the mountains. They didn't want to sacrifice themselves. They had to be hunted. The king salmon was the only one that gave up his flesh and agreed to feed the people. And that's how life went along for a long time. The people lived through that flood. That was the Wenatchee people. The people in Puget Sound, they talk about that flood. They dreamed about it, and they built 2 boats. One was a great big boat, one was a little boat. They put their kids in one, they put their supplies in another. When the flood came, they sang a flood song, a flood survivor song. And that's what the kids heard when their parents were drowned. The parents died, but the children lived. They floated and floated until the earth changed again. Mount Baker went out of sight. And finally they dropped out, it dropped, and one boat landed in Vancouver and landed in Orcas Island. They came off them boats, got their supplies, and as the children were growing, they paired off and they went all throughout Puget Sound. Finally, some had fish, some had trout, these people had camas, these people, they had clams. Every one of the families there, they went, had something. And they brought it all together for a great potlatch. When they came together, the elders told them, remember where you come from. You're flood survivors. Your parents stayed behind, remember who they were. So they were told to put the name Ish after every one of their names, the Salish, the Toppenish, Sammamish, all the tribes that have the last words Ish are flood survivors. So almost got you played out. Try a little harder.
Oh, keep working on it.
Two more. Spokane. They talk about the flood when it came. For them, it was a lake. Everybody was living in the lakes. There was no Spokane City. They were all living on the bridges. The earth started shaking. They started feeling water rising, so it scared them. They went high on the ridges, and all of a sudden, kaboom! A wall of water came from the north, wiped everything out. And then finally, the worst ash fell. What's interesting about this story is there's ash in the story. There's a huge explosion and ash falls from the sky, kills whatever life is left. Finally, the earth shakes again, the water goes away, and there's just a little trickle where Spokane Falls is today. And they followed it out to a place called Dry Falls. That's where the Columbia was going over. But that's where the fish would only come up that far. So they lived a couple of generations there until the earth shook and it changed course and went up against the Wenatchee and come out. And they say that our generations followed that Wenatchee out, our family, and became the clans that we are today. The last one is the Blue Mountains. We tell the story there. Different story. After the flood came and we survived, we made it to the tops of the land. After the flood went away, we separated. We became Mountain Indians and Plateau Indians. There was a huge battle about 5,000 years ago. Mountain Indians lost. We followed the vision of a yellow bird on top, where the trees comes out of the ground, it grows down, and it comes back up again. Those are markers. Those are marker trees. That's where the Aztecs started. That's where the Lenape started. We all started from that place on top of those mountains, in the Blue Mountains. We came down into following the Colorado and the Snake. We became the Shoshone, Bannock, the Ute. We went farther and we became the Zuni, the Hopi. We became the Cliff Dwellers, living in the cliffs. Generations followed and did battle until finally the Spider Woman came out and told us to go live on the mesas. Another portion of us went farther south and we became the Aztec. Some of us went clear down towards Chile. Another portion of us went out to become the Lenape and created Cahokia. Had a battle there with the Star People, which is another story. And then we went clear out there. They call those, look for the Lenape stones. Lenape stones. They tell the origin story, carved in stone before the flood. Then there's a Hopi prophecy, which is that spiral I was showing you. And we migrated. Here's where two stories come together. The Kennewick man and the Hopi. The Hopi prophecy says that 5,000 years ago, we sent our white brother across the blue water. He was to go over there and learn a technology and a way of, and things that help with life and bring that back to us, our red brothers, and where to help us live together. I think this is that technology today. The books, the things that we're learning, all the things that we have as 4 nations, we're all learning together. I think this is those times we're learning that good knowledge. But they also mentioned that that white brother could bring back something. He drops from the sky and it could wipe out all of Earth. You know what that is. We've seen it. Radiation, atomic bombs. We don't want to have to go that direction. But instead they say that when they come back, they're going to join brothers and sisters dancing in the Northwest in sun dances and be wearing red hats. Not MAGA hats, mind you, but red hats, red vests, or red skirts. Well, we as sun dancers wear red skirts. We vision quest, we pray on sacred sites. All the people of the Northwest, they're praying on their sacred ways, so our old ways are coming back. Almost through my list. The reason I'm talking to you today is because a Felipe Canyon man came to me a month ago. Way back in '91, I dreamed the ancient ones. They told me to go after like I told you, to help the ancient ones. They didn't want them dug up. They wanted me to drum and sing, to learn and study in a good way. They sent me in a dream from Mount Adams, from the unborn. And they asked me to take care of things in this good way and that they would over time share their knowledge. Now's that time. I thought it was all over. We were putting away the Kennewick man. It was kind of put away. Then last month, something came up, and the spiral, I started studying that spiral again. And it led me to, I contacted a lady looking for information and stories because I knew. South of Toppenish, Washington. Ready to go to Google Earth? Gonna go to Google? Okay. Leaving the spiral. This is my home in Benton City. All right.
Well, that's Benton City right there.
Yeah. Yeah, Benton City. They're right here.
Okay.
But right up over in here. Can't quite bring it up. Right where that rock crosses. Oops. Is a rock house. The point is, that stone house was there, I believe. It could be 240,000, 140,000 years old. But I believe it was there when Lake Lewis was there and when the Columbia River flowed through Yakima Valley. Now, interesting part about that, not gonna do it, so I'm gonna go back to this. Now, I believe that the Columbia River, at one time, according to, and you'll see this on the ancient rivers, Columbia River came from here through this gap. They call it a dry gap, Sunnyside Gap. Came past Sunnyside, past this mountain right here, that this is the Columbia River coming through here, down here, up over, and it comes out in Goldendale. Now that they've geologically figured this out, that they went through there, Columbia River went through here before Wallula Gap. It puts that possibly at 2 million years old. So, right from here to here is 10 of those fisheries I was telling you about. They're 600 feet, I mean not six, about 60 feet to 100 feet tall. They're all at about 1,100 feet elevation. You can see them. If you're coming from Toppenish on Highway 97, You go past both creeks. There's one right here, tip of those fingers.